Welcome to the Comedy Reset Spotlight. This is the place to be if you want to hear from some of the most innovative and exciting comedy creators from around the globe. On this podcast, you'll hear from a variety of guests who are pushing the boundaries of what comedy can be. If you're looking for fresh perspectives and new ideas, this is the podcast for you.
Episode 25. New Jersey comedian, Suzanne Linfante.
When did you first start doing stand-up comedy?
The first time I started stand-up comedy was back in 2009. I went at it for about 6 months. I started with a class and then did it for about 6 months. And then something else came up that just did not allow me to be out late at night every night to try stand-up. So I gave up, and then I don't know what happened. Somehow 6 years later, at the end of 2015, I couldn't stop myself and I started all over again, took another class and jumped back in, and I've been doing it ever since.
What made you want to become a stand-up comedian?
To be honest, I never wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I always thought it just wasn't for me. It looked too scary. I could never do that. I wanted to get into comedy because I've always wanted to be in a TV sitcom pretty much since birth. Like, that's all I ever wanted. Every sitcom I watched, it was like, that's what I want to do. They're having fun while they're working. They're making other people feel like they belong to something and that they have somewhere to turn to, like no matter what's going on in their lives. And that's what I wanted to do. So stand-up comedy seemed to be the best avenue. So here I am trying stand-up comedy.
Who were some of your influences?
It's so hard to pick like a favorite or an influencer because I just love all comedians. But I definitely tend to lean towards the quirkier ones, the sharper ones, the ones that kind of make you think just a little bit, like Stephen Wright. I just love his comedy. I have more energy than he does, so I could never just stand there and deadpan it, but I just thought he was absolutely hysterical. Rita Rudner. Loved her comedy. If I could model myself after someone, yeah, she's definitely one of the influencers. Bill Engvall of the Blue Collar Comedy Group, I really enjoy him as well. And if I could channel anyone's confidence and humor, it would be Whitney Cummings. I just love her humor. I love her confidence, and I would just love if I could channel some of that while I'm on stage.
What was your first time on stage like?
First time on stage, I think it was a lot of things. It was daunting that there was a bright light in my eyes. It was a Gotham Comedy Club downstairs in the Vintage Room, I think it's called. And the spotlight was so bright. I was not expecting that, not used to that. I also had like a Giants jersey on and was not expecting like just to not connect with anyone in the crowd. And I think I just expected to get up there and make people laugh. And I literally just stood there like, I don't know what to say. And so it was frightening, humbling, and very bright.
What's your favorite joke?
I have a lot of favorite jokes, I guess. It's hard to pick one. But if I had to pick just my go-to joke, if someone says, "Hey, give me a quick joke," it's not one of my own. It's a street joke, and it's a pun, which makes it even worse. But it always cracks me up, so I'm gonna go with it. And that is, did you hear that a wig truck overturned on the highway? Police are combing the area.
What's the worst heckler experience you've ever had?
I am very happy to say that I've never had a really bad heckler experience. And I don't know if that's good or bad, because does that mean I'm just not getting out there enough and, I haven't lived enough or whatever? But the only heckling, or the only thing I would call heckling I've had, is my sister's been at a few shows. And since a lot of my jokes are true stories, she'll make comments during my set, like either telling the punchline or making a comment about the joke. And to me, I'm like, wow, my own sister's heckling me.
What's the best gig you've ever had?
Oh, this one's easy. I just had this. I hosted New Year's Eve at Scotty's Pub in Comedy Cove, and it was just an amazing experience for me. When I got the gig, I was literally jumping up and down in my office and so excited to do it. And I have to say, it was a fantastic night. It went really well, and I had on the most sparkly New Year's Eve shoes, and I felt like they were magical.
What's the worst gig you've ever had?
Oh, this one's a little tougher just because there's more to choose from. But it would have to be in a bar restaurant in Cranford, New Jersey. And the part that it was a bar restaurant wasn't bad at all, but there was a square bar around a TV set, and it was the first night of baseball playoffs where the Mets actually got in. Now, I'm a huge Mets fan too, so I actually understand that I was talking to people's backs, but not one person in that bar wanted to hear any of us do comedy.
How do you deal with stage fright?
Boy, I have to say, I've actually done a lot of research on this because I do have a lot of stage fright. It's gotten better with repetition. So I feel like the best way to get over stage fright is to just keep getting on stage. The more awkward situation, the better. And the more uncomfortable you are, the better, because you just kind of get used to it. But I've tried everything from deep breathing to focusing on a space in the room where I can just mentally direct my anxiety to, and like kind of just use my hands and like poof, shoot it over there, pew, pew. Yeah. So I try and shoot my anxiety across the room. I try deep breathing. And the other thing I've done, which is a little crazy, and I fully admit that, is that I've kind of thought of an imaginary friend to bring up on stage with me. So I've just been like, can you just stand here with me? And it's good if it's someone, maybe who's passed on, like who was a comedian, like Louis Anderson is a great person to like be like, can you just get up on stage with me and be there with me? And then I don't feel so alone and so on target up there. And yes, you can call the authorities now and have me taken away, because I really do that.
What was the most unexpected response you've ever gotten to one of your jokes?
Well, I could say the most unexpected response was actual laughter. But I mean, I'm definitely not surprised when people don't laugh. I feel like sometimes people laugh at a place where I wasn't intending to be funny or at an off the cuff remark. And I think maybe that's the most unexpected response I've gotten to one of my jokes. I can't think of anything else specifically that's ever, gone off the rails.
How do you prepare for a show?
The two main things I do to prepare for a show are go to as many open mics as possible and create a set list. Because for me, I need a set list in my head to know a map of what I'm doing when I'm on stage for the show. But I don't necessarily do those jokes at every open mic. I'm just going to the open mics for stage time. I want to be on stage. I want to have people staring at me and just get used to that and get used to them maybe not laughing. Yeah, how could that be? No, but you get used to the crickets too. So just so I'm not thrown during the show. I'll even do what I call a step mic, which is I stand on the steps of my living room in my empty house and I go through my set just to get the feel of doing that set on stage. And I've actually gotten nervous standing on my own steps with absolutely nobody in my house. I don't know if I'm afraid of judgment from the spiders or what, but it's weird. But I like to get those nerves out ahead of time. And it also shows me where maybe I'm stumbling over a certain part of the joke. So I really find it helpful, as crazy as that sounds.
What's the best advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy?
I have been given so much fantastic advice from so many people, other comedians, mentors, YouTube videos, podcasts, books, so much great advice out there. And I really appreciate all of it. But the one piece that has stuck with me that happens to be my favorite piece of advice came from Steve Martin. It's a Steve Martin quote, which is, "Be so good they can't ignore you." I just love that idea. I'm definitely not there yet. I don't know if I'll ever be that good, but I have to say that is what I'm striving for. And that is truly my favorite piece of advice.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy?
I can't really think of anything bad advice that I've received. I tend to think that any advice at all has to be taken with a grain of salt, and you take what works for you and you just, ignore the rest. I can't think of anything bad that's been advice. I mean, other than "you suck, go home, don't ever do this again." But that's coming from my own head. So is that really advice?
What would you say is the biggest misconception about stand-up comedy?
I think the biggest misconception is that comics don't prepare. And I know there's some that don't and go right off the cuff, but I think the majority of comedians that you see making it to really high levels in comedy are not just going off the top of their head. They prepare very hard for every show that they do. And they've, in some cases, written everything out specifically, but they're able to deliver it in such a seamless way that you think it's just coming off the top of your head. And a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm funny. I can just get on stage and I can just talk off the top of my head and I'm the next Chris Rock. And it takes a lot of work. And I don't think people realize how much work goes into stand-up comedy.
What do you believe is the key to success in stand-up comedy?
Well, I'll go back to Steve Martin on this and say, be so good they can't ignore you. But how do you do that? How do you get so good that they can't ignore you? And I think that's where the keys to success come in. You got to work at it. You got to work hard. You have to do it often. You have to get your stage time. You have to spend time writing. You have to listen to feedback. And maybe take some pointers from people because you don't always know what's best. And just be a good human. Show up on time, be respectful to others, treat it like a real job because it is a real job. And I think those will get you pretty far.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle that stand-up comedians face?
Well, I have to say one of my biggest obstacles is my own head. Just getting out of my own head is one of my biggest obstacles because if I don't believe in me, nobody else is going to believe in me either. Another obstacle is just that there's so many comedians. It's hard to get a spot on a show when there's 85 others in line ahead of you or whatever. So I think it's just the sheer volume of comedians and for me, getting out of my head.
What do you think sets stand-up comedy apart from other forms of comedy?
I think it's the vulnerability. You're standing all alone on that stage with material that you wrote. So this is coming from you. This is like your show and tell in kindergarten kind of thing. All eyes are on you and they expect you to make them laugh. They paid for you to make them laugh. And there's pressure on you for that. There's a vulnerability. And it's also the dynamic of the crowd because every crowd is different and has their own dynamic. There's an energy in the room and a joke that absolutely kills one night will bomb the next night and you have no idea why. So I think that's kind of what sets it apart is the vulnerability.
What are the benefits of stand-up comedy?
I think there's a lot of benefits to stand-up comedy. The people that I've met since I started stand-up comedy, I never would have met otherwise. There's some great people out there. Just the act of doing it does give you better confidence. I mean, it is one of the most biggest fears in the world to speak in front of a group of people. And when you start doing stand-up comedy on a regular basis, you can walk into that board meeting at your day job and they don't faze you a bit. It's like you have no more butterflies. You can deliver any kind of presentation because it's like, look, I've done stand-up comedy in New York City. There is nothing you can throw at me that's gonna make me feel bad up here.
What's your process for writing jokes?
Oh, I'm actually a little embarrassed by this question because I've been at this steadily since the end of 2015 and I still don't have a solid writing process. I try different things at different times. I'll read a book and see their process. So I'll try that. I'll try and go back, to a segment of my life, 5-year chunks of my life and see if there's something in there. But a lot of times the best jokes come from when I'm just spitballing in the car driving. I've got a long drive and I just start talking out loud and trying to think of something. And that's when something comes out of my mouth that I wasn't even expecting. And I'm like, oh, well, I should write that down. That was pretty good. And I find that's where some of them come from, but it's not a consistent thing. And I need to be more consistent in just sitting down and discipline of writing. So I'm a little embarrassed that I still haven't gotten into that perfect routine yet.
What's the most important thing for a stand-up comedian to remember?
Boy, I don't think I know. I don't know the answer to this. I think for me, the most important thing to remember is that it isn't going to kill me. If I have one bad show or I bomb up there for one thing, there's always another opportunity tomorrow, and that it's not always me. Maybe sometimes the crowd just isn't into my kind of humor. And I just have to remember that. So I think that's it. And just to believe in yourself, because until you believe in yourself, nobody else is going to get on board.
What do you think are the best techniques for dealing with hecklers?
I really haven't had a lot of experience with hecklers, so I can only go by what I've seen other people do. And I think the best technique is to stay in the moment, to remember that the crowd is going to be on your side, and to stay calm and just try and either talk them out of it or just make a joke out of it, but to handle it and move on unless it is not moving on, and then to get help from the bouncer because somebody's got to get rid of them.
What do you think are the biggest mistakes that stand-up comedians make?
Maybe not listening to feedback, because really the audience is your feedback. If you tell the same joke 20 times and 20 times it gets 0 laughs, you can't keep blaming the audience. And I think a lot of us want to blame the audience because we really like that joke and it's so funny to us. Like, why? Why are you not laughing? So I think not at least considering feedback from other people or from the audience.
What is the best way to learn stand-up comedy?
I don't know that there's one best way to learn anything. Classes helped me. Books helped me. Watching other comics helped me. So I can't even really say doing it also helps, but I think you need to have an idea of what you're doing. And again, listening to feedback and seeing, well, why, not just that a joke didn't work, but why didn't it work? And what can I do to make that joke better as well as my other jokes? So again, whatever way it is that you learn best, I think is the best way to learn comedy.
What do you think is the best way to improve as a stand-up comedian?
I think one of the best ways to improve is to just keep doing it. The more you do it, the more you see what works, what doesn't, the more comfortable you get. And the more comfortable you are, the better you get. But also, again, listening to feedback and constantly working to improve even the jokes that are getting a laugh, constantly working to improve even those jokes and to write new ones seems to be a good way.
What has stand-up comedy taught you about yourself?
I think it's taught me that I'm more gutsy than I think sometimes. Like, just getting on stage to the average person is really daunting. And the fact that I'm doing it and I keep doing it despite some, really not great shows, I have to say, I think it just shows me that I can do this, that I do have guts, and that I'm way too hard on myself sometimes.
What motivates you to keep performing stand-up comedy?
I have to say, I don't really know sometimes. Like, there are times you just get tired of it. There's just too much going on. Who has time to go out every night and do stand-up? And I don't know what makes me keep doing it. And yet I find if I'm sitting on the couch, it's like, why am I not out doing stand-up? And something makes me go out there. So the answer is I don't know.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about doing stand-up comedy?
My advice is, if you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Just do it. Go to an open mic, sit and watch the first time if you're too scared to get up on stage. And then next time, get up on stage, have something prepared, but get up on stage. If you learn in classes, take a class. It seems like, they can't teach stand-up comedy, but they can. And it's really helpful to get advice from people who've been there and done that.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we did not cover?
Seriously? This has been one of the most thorough interviews I've ever done. If there's anything that I could add, it's that Mr. Joke Zoom himself, Rob Chaffee, has just been an invaluable source of information, opportunities to do comedy and to workshop comedy classes, and just a shot in the arm when you really need it. So I would say thank you for that. And thank you for this interview. And have a great day.
I've been your host, Rob Chaffee. Don't forget to laugh today. It's good for you. Comedy Reset Spotlight is a podcast that brings you today's freshest and funniest comedy creators. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to hear more.